Hello everyone, Rob B here with Rob D, and you are listening to the Property Podcast. Most people think, wow, those guys, everything goes right for them. Are you kidding? In this episode, we're looking at what went wrong for us in 2016.
Yeah, depressingly, Rob, I predict this will be one of our most popular episodes of the year. Everyone's going to be tuning in to see what's gone wrong, and they won't be disappointed. There's loads of it. So we'll come to all that in just a sec, and we'll share some of the things that you can learn from it as well. So you can have a laugh at us and you can learn a lesson as well. What could be better? But first, we should quickly mention a couple of things that we've done recently. First of all, meetups were last week. I was in South Essex in Rayleigh. Great meetup there. They've got a really lovely location, great leaders, very experienced, and a lovely mix of people. So that was only the third one, and they had a really good crowd there. So if you are anywhere in that region, I definitely recommend getting along, because that looks like it's going to be a really strong one. And Rob, you were promised mince pies in St Albans. Did they deliver?
They certainly did. Thank you, Chris, who runs that meetup, and Lisa, his wife, who helps out as well. Thank you very much for the mince pies, but thank you for putting on, as always, a wonderful meetup. The St Albans meetup has been running longer than any other, I think, so thank you to Chris, who does a fantastic job there. I think the great thing about the meetups is the meetup leaders themselves have a wealth of experience, so some people, I know, like to go to the meetups where we go, and that's fine, but actually, go to these meetups. There's so many people with so much knowledge, and of course, the meetup leaders as well. A wealth of knowledge there, so take advantage of it. Get along to the meetups, introduce yourself to the meetup leaders. They're very nice, and they will help you out. And if that wasn't enough, Rob, for enjoyment levels, we of course recently had the RMP and Yellow Lettings Open Day, which was really successful and very enjoyable.
Yeah, it was a fantastic day. So we had loads and loads of people there. We talked about where the property market was going and made some predictions because it wasn't being recorded. So we felt in a safe space. We did a panel with some great guest experts and got to catch up with loads of lovely people. So it was a really great day. All the teams from RMP and Yellow were there as well. Probably do it again sometime, I'd have thought.
Yeah, definitely. The feedback was very, very positive. Thank you for everybody who came along. Thank you for all the lovely feedback. Some really nice words were said afterwards. And of course, some money made for charity as well. So everybody went. So all in all, a great day. And yes, I'm sure some point in 2017, we'll do it again.
Okay, well, every week we have a news story. And this week, it's one of my favourite types of news story because it's from the Told You So files. And this is a story about London house prices and how growth outside the southeast seems like it's going to be stronger in years to come. So this is a story from The Guardian that says the cost of housing in London is more expensive than anywhere else in the country, surprise, surprise, at 14 times average earnings, which is absolutely massive. And there's a nice graph that compares it to other places like Leeds and Glasgow, where it's dramatically lower. And there's also some commentary from the company that put this research together saying that it expects that London growth to be very, very slow. The same for Oxford and Cambridge, purely because they're so expensive. And he expects price rises to be higher in regional cities where they're more affordable to start with and there's more upside potential. Well, we have been banging that particular drum for quite a while.
I was going to say, there wasn't there two smart individuals who were mentioning this possibly as long as 2 years ago that this would happen? We were ahead of the game, Rob. Maybe we went too early, but the main thing is, and this is an important lesson, everybody, we were right.
And we've got to take whatever we can get and brag about it when we can, because we don't always get it right.
No, we don't. But we will gloss over those and focus on the stuff that we do so we seem better. Right. But that's going to be difficult with this week's episode, Rob, because this week we are looking at what went wrong for us this year. And there's, unfortunately, quite a list.
Yeah, it was more a case of what to leave out than what to put into this one. There's been absolutely loads. It's not been actually a typical year. It has been worse than usual in terms of random stuff going wrong. It's been a great year, but in terms of random things going wrong, there's been loads. So let's run through as many of them as we can stand and talk about some of the things that we might be able to do differently next time to avoid it happening.
So, Rob, let's start. Any evictions this year?
Yeah, just the one. My first eviction, actually.
Wow,
this is the first time I've actually had... Thank you very much. Rite of passage. This is after, what, I don't know, like sort of getting on for 10 years of letting property. This is the first time I've actually had to go through the whole eviction process. And you know what? It wasn't actually that painful. The painful part is that it was my fault in the first place because I took shortcuts. So the first lesson from this is don't take shortcuts. If I'd referenced this tenant properly, it would never have happened. but she was paying 6 months up front, therefore didn't bother with some of the checks that I otherwise would have made. And I was just so busy at the time that I didn't really give it enough thought. It's just like, I just want to get it done and not have to think about this for 6 months. 6 months, surprisingly, goes by very quickly, and then suddenly you've got an issue. So it was my first eviction. I'm kind of glad to have gone through the process because I got to learn a little bit more about it. It's like all these things. You learn about it in theory, but it's only really when you go through it that you properly get to understand it. And it was fine. But the annoying part is that I could have avoided the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised, Rob, because obviously we talk about the importance of referencing, and I'm sure I'm just speaking for what many people are now saying while listening to the podcast. So I appreciate you're busy, but what level of referencing did you do, and what would you have done differently?
Well, the situation was she was self-employed, had income, but wasn't in a position to prove it properly. And so she was willing to pay 6 months up front. What I said was, that's fine, but you do realise that in 6 months' time, you'll either have to pay another 6 months up front, or you'll have to be able to produce the evidence that we need to get onto a rent guarantee scheme. So be able to pass traditional referencing. She said yes, and naively, I thought that would be okay. Realistically, if she wanted to move in, she probably would have said anything to be able to move in, knowing that once you're in, it can be quite hard to get out. So really, I shouldn't have been blinded by the money up front and the kind of the lack of hassle. I should have just waited and found someone who definitely didn't have any red flags, and just done it that way.
Yeah, I can definitely see the temptation there, especially with somebody who's able to produce 6 months of funds. I can understand why that happened. So it went wrong. What did you do? Did you panic? I don't think you did you?
No, I didn't. I just went through the process, and I used professionals. So there's a company that we use at Yellow Lettings called Evict Them. I used them to basically go through the whole process. So they served all the notices, filled in all the forms. I think I had to sign something at one point, and that was it. And it was all actually really painless. So the whole process took a couple of months from start to finish. And the tenant at this point was digging her heels in and saying, I'm just going to stay until I get thrown out. It's going to take you months and months to get rid of me. It didn't. It was a straightforward Section 21. Because I had professionals helping, we got all the paperwork right, and therefore there was no risk there of things getting thrown out. And so really, I think the other lesson from it is that even the worst case isn't as bad as you think. So, what's the worst thing that can happen as a landlord? You can have a tenant who's in there and not paying the rent. Well, that happened. It was dealt with, lost out on income for a couple of months, but then a month of that was covered by the deposit anyway. And did it really cause me any sleepless nights? Did it take up any of my time? No, it just kind of happened in the background. And then one day, she's gone. Let's get it ready to go again. And that was it.
Cool. So plenty of lessons learned as well, though. I don't think it's going to happen again. Well, not anytime soon, anyway.
No, that's the important thing. And we're going to see this a lot. It's like, there are some things that just happen. There's nothing you can do about it. But when there is something you can do, it's worth examining everything just to see if there is something you could have done differently to make sure it doesn't happen next time. And that's a really easy one for me. But Rob, I'm not the only one who's been having some tenant trouble this year.
Yeah, slight twist, Rob. My tenants did a runner. And unfortunately, not round the corner. They went back home, and home for them was Eastern Europe. So let me set the scene. I bought a property a few years ago, and it came with sitting tenants. And those tenants hadn't been referenced. Now, you can get your tenants referenced when you take them on. I didn't, and basically because I didn't think they'd pass. However, what I did instead was my due diligence to make sure they paid on time up until that point. They'd been there a while, they had a track record, and it went okay. So far, so good. I'd owned the property. I think I've owned it for over 2 years now. Paid on time, every time. Maybe, okay, a few days late here and there, but generally very, very good tenants. And communicative as well. They would speak to me for a couple of days late, or the letting agent. So, fast forward to this year, and they started to get behind. They went a month behind. Then we had to set up a payment plan to get them back on. And the signs were there that things weren't right. And basically, it was a 3-bed apartment. It was 2 or 3 of them in this apartment. One was out of work. Then I think another one went out of work. I'm not sure if it had anything to do with Brexit, but basically their work dried up, and they were desperate to make it work for them. But unfortunately, they just, instead of dragging it out and going through the system like your lovely lady did, they just packed up, left a note, said they were very sorry, and went. So I was down maybe a couple of months' rent in the end, which is a shame, but I didn't have to go through the eviction process, which is a bonus. I don't think they wanted to get into that situation, and I know you shouldn't get emotional over these things, but I did feel sorry for them because I think they wanted to make it work, and they'd been tenants for a long time up until that point. And unfortunately, these things do happen from time to time. People's life circumstances change and things go wrong. The unfortunate thing, though, is it wasn't left quite in a top standard, shall we say.
So that's always a bit of a kick in the teeth, isn't it? When you get a situation like this, you miss out on a couple of months' rent, and then you get the property back, and you need to spend some money on it before you can do anything with it again. So what was the damage?
It was things like carpets were a bit dirty, either needed cleaning or replacing. Walls were scuffed and marks that needed painting. And then some of the decoration that they'd taken upon themselves was interesting. So it needed just to be brought up back to standard. However, when I took the property on, it wasn't in a top standard anyway, and it probably needed a bit of a light refurb. So actually beyond that, replaced the kitchen cabinets, brought it up to standard, really made it nice. And actually, the good news is now it's got a new tenant in there. It's a doctor who's passed all his referencing, and I'm feeling a lot more confident. Oh, and a bit more rent too. So yes, it was a bad situation, but in the end, it all came good. Yes, I am down a bit of money, and yes, I've had to spend a bit of money bringing it up to standard, but I would have needed to do that at some point soon anyway. And now I've got a really good tenant, I hope, and I'm getting a bit more rent. So all in all, while it isn't fun and it's not nice for those situations to play out, it didn't end up too bad once I'd given time to play out. And I think this is one of the things we're going to look at. In the moment, things can seem quite bad, but assess it at the end.
So you took this property over with tenants already in there, which means you couldn't reference them. Do you now, having gone through that experience, regret having done that? Do you wish you kind of got rid of them, or put them through referencing, either got rid of them or got a rent guarantee in place there and then to avoid this happening? Or are you it sounds like you got a couple of good years out of it anyway.
I did, and I could have tried for a rent guarantee, but I don't think it would have passed because I believe they were on 0-hour contracts, so they would have struggled possibly to pass referencing for a rent guarantee. What I did instead is I looked at their track record, looked at what they'd done already, looked at they were up to date and paid on time. So I got a rental schedule of what they'd done previously when I purchased it. And they did have a good run. They went 2 years. I think it was just circumstance. I don't think they were inherently bad people or tenants. I just think it was a bad situation for them. And that was the only way they could deal with it. But they left. Rather than trying to drag it out and work the system, they just left. So lessons, would I have done anything different? I don't know is the truth. I think I did a reasonable amount of due diligence. And yes, I could have moved them on straight away when I took the property on because I couldn't reference them. But actually, I don't think I would do that again if I played it back. I think if you do enough due diligence, and I think the fact that they paid for 2 years shows that they were half-decent tenants, then I think you're okay. I think the thing to learn from this particular thing, or the thing I've learned or reinforce my learning, is that one bad tenant, or in this case 2 or 3 of them in this apartment, doesn't make a bad property, or a bad investment. Yes, it's unfortunate, but it's been brought up to standard now. I've got more rent, and I've got a really strong tenant.
Yeah, it sounds like had they not left, you weren't going to get strung along by sort of them keeping saying they were going to pay and then not paying. It sounds like you're dealing with that quite proactively, because you hear about people who just manage to, fall for sob stories and get it dragged on for months and months and months. So it sounds like you were prepared to deal with that correctly. Really, the resolution was about as good as you could hope for. Definitely good that they left voluntarily.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's tenants, Rob. Anything break this year?
You've been reading ahead, haven't you?
I have.
Yeah, so what can go wrong with a property? Tenants can cause you issues, or things can go wrong with the property itself. When you think about the different things that can go wrong with a property, I think I've had all of them this year. It's been absolutely nuts. I was preparing for this episode, going through, trying to sort of total up all the things that I've had to spend money on in the last few months. It's not even this year, it's just the last few months. And I can't even remember what all of it is. I do know for a fact that there's been 3 boilers, there's been 2 leaks, and there's been 1 additional leak where I had a leak from one of my flats down into another one of my flats, and also into about 4 other flats and the communal area of the building. That was fun. Also got 2 new cookers, 1 new freezer, loads of other bits that I can't even remember right now. And coincidentally, at the same time as all that, I'd already committed to doing a full refurb, which I've had to pay for, and getting new double glazing for another property. So I've just basically felt like a walking wallet for the last few months. I've done nothing except make bank transfers for stuff. It's been absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, that seems very high. Even though you've got a sizable portfolio, that still seems excessive for 1 year. So things go wrong. Is there anything you felt you've learned from this?
Well, there's a couple of things potentially I could have done to avoid some of this from hitting all at the same time. So I could have had an annual refurb plan to try and avoid having loads of spending in one go. So with the boilers, for example, I had a few properties that had very old boilers, and I knew it. They weren't getting into the territory of, things starting to go wrong and patching it up and everything, but I knew they were old. So what I could perhaps have done was replace them before they started actually going wrong, because it just so happened that everyone turned on their boiler at the same time. 3 of them didn't work and they all needed to be replaced. Always difficult, of course, to put your hand in your pocket and spend money before someone's screaming at you to do so. The other thing that I could have done, and perhaps will do now actually, is consider an emergency repairs policy. So you can get policies which are quite reasonable that cover you for emergencies, and you can give the emergency number to the tenant. So if anything goes wrong to do with the heating or sanitation or security, they can call, someone will come out and they'll fix the emergency. So they wouldn't replace the boiler if it needed completely replacing, but if it was just like a small job that would get it back on track, they would do that. So that's something that I will consider now, because they won't insure really old boilers for obvious reasons. So that's a couple of things that I could have done. But when it comes to things like the leaks, I thought my assistant was winding me up at one point because she was just constantly messaging. It was like, oh, there's a leak here, there's a leak here. It's like, really? Are you sure you're not talking about the same one from a few days ago? Because this seems to have happened a lot. I think some of it was just pure bad luck.
Yeah, it's going to happen from time to time. You have a good run and then things go wrong. I know in your portfolio, I know you have some newer properties in your portfolio, but you also have some older style properties as well. Would you say this is probably because of your portfolio mix that it's been exaggerated slightly?
It could be. The annoying thing is that the actual maintenance was in a real spread. So the houses, which are a bit older, that's where the boilers went. The flats, which are newer, that's where the leaks were. The leak where I had one of my flats leaking into another one is just, I couldn't believe it when that one happened. But it happens. The building's insurance will cover it. So I think the point is things can go wrong in all different types of property. But yes, when you've got older properties with older boilers and roofs and all that kind of thing, there is the scope for more to go wrong. So I've had a significant financial outlay over the last few months, but I had the reserves. I just sort of paid it out of rent that had been accumulating. It hurt, but it wasn't a problem. But I think there's a useful point in there, which is that things like leaks in flats and things like that, a lot of the time you will have buildings insurance that will cover it, whereas things like boilers, often you won't. And so the actual expenditure will be higher for that kind of thing in older properties rather than new ones.
Well, I feel a bit embarrassed bringing mine up now, Rob, because I've got one maintenance problem, but it was a super leak as well. It's actually my first ever property / investment, and it's over 10 years old. So I wondered if it was just, because it's a bit older, this is why it's starting to give me trouble. But it was a washing machine originally, and it was leaking, but unfortunately not enough for the tenant to notice or complain. And over time, every single wash, it leaked a bit more and leaked a bit more. But because it was a built-in washing machine, integrated into the kitchen units, it wasn't as apparent. And maybe there was a bit of water, I don't know. The tenant said there wasn't, but maybe there's a bit of water at first. But over time, this started to erode down into the wooden flooring and then further down. And it's caused basically the whole kitchen in this apartment to have a massive hole, but it's got so bad now that all the flooring underneath the kitchen is unstable and it all needs replacing and a new kitchen needs to go in. Now, like previously, I like to see the glass half full. I needed to do the kitchen anyway, so that's kind of fortunate that I'm going to replace the kitchen because it probably needed replacing because it's over 10 years old now. The leak is unfortunate. I'm struggling to see what I can learn from this one. I think the biggest thing I can learn is this particular property isn't in the yellow lettings portfolio yet because it's one of my oldest ones and the tenant's been there a while. So I've not moved it over because I've just thought this current agent, they've had it for so many years that they may as well just have it until this tenant leaves. Unfortunately, though, and this is not a dig at all letting agents because there are some of the good ones. I'm not trying to say yellow's the only good agent out there. But this is one of those agents that reports problems but doesn't give you solutions. So, oh, Rob, there's a hole in the floor. Okay, what should we do? I don't know. What do you want to do? It's like, I'd like it fixed. Who are you going to recommend? So basically, I've had to, even though it's fully managed, I'm doing quotation marks that nobody can see, even though it's fully managed, I've had to source the person to fix it. I've had to arrange it all. I've done up basically the managing of the property to get this sorted and fixed. So my biggest lesson from this possibly is use a good letting agent because when things like this do happen, they can take control of the situation and manage this process for you.
Yeah, and I think something that we've both got in common is that when things go wrong, there's a money cost and a time cost. And I think we're both more concerned about the time cost than the money. Things happen, you need to replace them, that's fine. You don't want to be paying more than you need to, but you really don't want to be spending all your time dealing with all that because that's got a cost as well. It's taking you away from things that you like doing and things that could be making more money. So in my case, I've got my properties managed, but I've also got an assistant who kind of deals with the agents. And so with all these many things that went wrong, I didn't actually have to do anything. It didn't take up any of my time other than making a lot of bank transfers. But it is annoying when you think that you're paying for a service and you've got someone who'll be sorting it out and then you end up doing all the running around yourself. Is there anything you could have done to avoid that? Or is it just the case that you come up against some things and if you haven't got you don't really know you haven't got the right letting agent until something major happens?
Yeah, that's always going to be a challenge. That's why asking for referrals in your local network is always useful. So speaking to people at like the property meetups, go in there and say, who do you use? Who manages your property? And for those people who have their properties managed, they'll probably be able to say, yes, this person's really good, or yes, this company I use, but actually I'd avoid them because they're not very good. So, you're right, Rob. It's not easy, but doing the research, spending time, I think, invested in researching the property people you're going to work with, whatever type of role they're going to play, is time well spent. So, Rob, it's been a challenging year. Should we give up this game?
Well, I do think in my case, especially, if this had been your first year in property, you probably would have packed your bags and gone home by this point. It's just beyond a joke at some point. But I think the important thing is we always say this, and it's true. Property is a long-term game. I won't remember any of this in 10 years' time. I won't really remember any of it next year. Even though it seems like a bad run at the time, none of it is a game changer. None of it is going to make a difference to the underlying principles of the whole thing. I think the important thing is to know that it happens. I don't think anyone could accuse us of saying that property is all brilliant all the time. These things always happen. Things will go wrong. When they go wrong, sometimes there are lessons to be learned. We've talked about some of those, but sometimes stuff just happens and there's not a lot you can do about it. I think the important thing is to be grateful when things are going well and not take it for granted. And then when something does go against you, say, oh, well, it was bound to happen. And I've had plenty of really good years where I've barely had anything go wrong and I've barely laid out any money. So now it just happens that I've been doing it all at the same time. So it's just really taking a bit of perspective on it and not getting caught up in, the unfairness of a tenant doing this, or the hassle of, oh, what am I going to do about this bit of maintenance? If you can just chill out about it, most of it is, when you zoom out a bit, really insignificant.
Absolutely agree. It's how you deal with this is how your experience of it will be. I can assure you I didn't fall apart when those bad things happened. It's like, oh, better get that sorted then. And that's really, that was my attitude to it. And some people go, oh, well, I would have been really stressed over that. Maybe you're not investing it and go, wow, how do you guys do it? If you actually think that you would fall apart over those type of things, then property investment probably isn't for you. Things happen. Loads of good things happen too. You get capital growth. You become wealthy. You get paid every month, most months. And yeah, there's a lot of upside. But all that upside, quite rightly, should come with some challenges. If it was easy, everybody would do it. Now, if you're going to celebrate the wins, but stress over and fall apart over the niggles and the things that go wrong, then find something else. But if you just accept it as part of the game, and yeah, it's a small part of a journey, that's a big, big journey, and this is just one step along the road, then you'll be fine. So the main lesson here is it's just part of the game. It happens. And as you can see, we've taken you through what happened and what the results were, and we're still here, we're still alive and breathing, we're still growing our portfolios, and very much still going to be talking about property for weeks and months and years to come.
So I hope you've enjoyed hearing what's gone wrong for us. If you've got similar war stories to tell, do feel free to go over to thepropertyhub.net/forum and talk about it there. There'll be a topic for this episode. And in general, as anything happens, if there's anything that you want to get off your chest and have a moan about, then you'll be in good company, and you can also share any lessons that you've got to make sure that other people can avoid it in future if possible. But I think, Rob, having relived all of that, we deserve to cheer ourselves up with an iTunes review.
We do. So much so, Rob. I'm going to do two, but they're only short. So thank you very much to the following. Matt in London Town says, Rob and Rob have been delivering great content for years. I'm now in a position to start investing, so their podcasts, books, blogs, life hacks will get me off to a flying start. Thanks, Matt. Thank you, Matt. And Dean says, hi, Rob and Rob. Been listening to you guys for about 9 months now, and it's always great content and tips. Was great to meet you both at the property show in April. Many thanks. Well, thanks, Matt. Thanks, Dean. And thank you to everybody who's left us a review. We very, very much appreciate it. When those things go wrong, we go to our reviews to cheer us up.
Well, it sounds sad, but yes, we actually do. Okay, so let's repay those reviews with a nice resource of the week. And this one is actually thanks to somebody I met at the Discovery Day, whose name I can't remember, unfortunately, but you'll know who you are, and thank you very much, who recommended a podcast player for iPhone called Overcast. It's overcast.fm. And if you use iTunes as your podcast player, then that's fine. But he says that this one is far better. And in particular, it's better for speeding up episodes. So we've talked about this in the past, how we listen to episodes at faster, so like 1.5 times speed, so we can get through more podcasts. And once you adjust, you actually don't miss out on any information that way. And he says that Overcast is better than iTunes for doing that. So I'm an Android user, so I don't know, but I thought it was worth giving that a shout out in case you are frustrated with iTunes and looking for something better.
I've used Overcast, so I can speak from first-hand experience. It is very good, and it is better than the iTunes app. I actually, although Overcast is on my phone, I've stopped using it, and I use Downcast, D-O-W-N, cast. That's my preferred choice for podcasting. Again, great for listening to podcasts at different speeds and getting through them that little bit faster, because I do like a podcast or two, like yourself, Mr. D, so getting through them a little bit faster does help. I agree with the iTunes assessment. The app is okay and it's free, and it's not bad for free. However, what I would say in its favour, the iTunes app, is it's pretty good for discovering podcasts. That's what it does better than Overcast and Downcast. But once you've got a number of podcasts that you're happy with, use Overcast or Downcast. They're both very good, and I think you'll get a little bit more out of your podcast experience, so check it out. And when you do go to these apps, make sure your number one priority, if you haven't already, is to subscribe to the Property Podcast, which is very easy to do. Just go to the podcast on those apps, hit subscribe, and you'll get it delivered to your app every single week.
Yeah, an enormous number of people still listen to the podcast through our website and presumably do the same for other podcasts. You can do that. We've made it easier for you to do that, but it's so much easier to subscribe. You get way more control over it when you're actually listening, and every episode comes to you. So why would you not subscribe? Go do that now.
Exactly, because you don't want to miss next week. Last week, we did a show on deals and your deals, and we assessed them live. Well, live recording anyway. We were going through the internet, jumping on Rightmove, checking out all the data, and giving our assessments of deals. We were a bit nervous. We wondered whether it would work via audio, whether the experience would work. We enjoyed ourselves, but we wondered if it would be delivered the way we'd liked it to be delivered through the airwaves. Well, the good news was your answer was a resounding yes. Thank you so much for your feedback through the forum, through emails directly to Rob and myself, through social media. I know a few people tweeted me about it. Thank you so much. It was great to get that feedback. Really appreciate it. And as a thank you back to you, we'll do another episode on that next week as it was so popular.
Yeah, really fun to do. And yeah, apparently people enjoyed it. So more than happy to do that again. We've got loads to get through. Thank you for sending all those in. We'll be doing that again next week. In the meantime, we will, of course, be back with Ask Rob and Rob on Tuesday. So do make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of these episodes coming up. Until then, though, enjoy your week. Have fun. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. For show notes, all our past episodes, and to leave a review, go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast.